The wind howled like a wounded beast across the vast Montana plains, whipping dust and dry grass into a frenzy that stung the eyes and clawed at the skin. Amy Lee Harper stood frozen at the edge of the old wooden fence, her thin jacket no match for the gathering storm. Dark clouds boiled on the horizon, lightning flickering like distant artillery, but it wasn't the weather that made her tremble. It was the man striding toward her, his weathered face etched with urgency, his voice cutting through the gale like a whip. "Get inside, before it's too late," the rancher ordered. She stared at him, trembling, her heart pounding not from fear of the storm, but from the ghosts it stirred within her. Amy Lee had arrived at the Broken Arrow Ranch just 2 days ago, a stranger in a pickup truck with a battered suitcase and as that spoke of miles traveled and dreams shattered. She was running from a life in the bustling streets of Chicago, where corporate ladders had turned into nooses, and from a marriage that had crumbled under the weight of unspoken regrets. At 35, she felt ancient, her spirit worn thin by years of chasing success that left her empty. The ad for a temporary ranch hand had seemed like a lifeline, a chance to disappear into the wide-open spaces where no one knew her name or her failures. But now, as thunder rumbled closer, she wondered if she'd fled one storm only to stumble into another. The rancher, Jack Thornton, was a fixture of these lands, a man in his late 50s with calloused hands that had tamed wild horses and mended fences through blizzards and droughts. His wife had passed 5 years ago from a sudden illness, leaving him to raise their teenage daughter, Lily, alone. The ranch was his world, a sprawling 500 acres of cattle, horses, and memories. He didn't trust easily, especially not city folk like Emily, with her soft hands and hesitant steps around the animals. Yet, when she'd shown up, something in her weary eyes had softened his resolve. He'd given her a job mucking stables and feeding the herd, figuring she'd bolt at the first sign of real work. But she hadn't. She worked quietly, diligently, as if proving something to herself. As the first fat raindrops splattered the parched earth, Jack grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, pulling her toward the barn. "Woman, you deaf? That twister's comin', fast." His voice was gruff, but beneath it lay a concern that surprised even him. Amy Lee's trembling intensified. She pulled back slightly, her mind flashing to another storm, years ago, when her father had shouted similar words before abandoning her family in the dead of night. Trust was a fragile thing for her, shattered like glass underfoot. But Jack's eyes, steel blue and steady, held no malice. Reluctantly, she followed him into the dim shelter of the barn, the scent of hay and horse sweat enveloping them like a blanket. Inside, the animals stirred uneasily, horses nickering, cattle lowing in the adjacent pens. Lily, Jack's daughter, was already there, her 16-year-old frame bustling with purpose as she secured loose gates and tossed extra hay into the stalls. She glanced at Emily with a mix of curiosity and wariness. The girl had her mother's fiery red hair and a spirit that refused to be dimmed by loss. "Dad, the radio said it's a bad one, possible tornado touchdown," Lily called out, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Jack nodded, his jaw set. "We'll ride it out. Always have." As the storm intensified, rain hammering the tin roof like gunfire, Emily found herself huddled in a corner, knees drawn to her chest. The trembling wouldn't stop, it was as if the thunder echoed the chaos in her soul. Jack noticed, pausing in his tasks to squat beside her. "First big storm out here?" he asked, his tone softer now, the order-giving rancher giving way to something more human. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "Not just the storm," she whispered. "It's everything." And then, unexpectedly, the words tumbled out: the failed marriage to a man who valued ambition over love, the job that had sucked her dry, the isolation that had followed her like a shadow. She hadn't planned to confess to a stranger, but in the roar of the wind, it felt like the only way to anchor herself. Jack listened without interruption, his rough hands clasped together. When she finished, tears streaking her face, he didn't offer platitudes. Instead, he shared his own scar, the night his wife, Sarah, had collapsed in this very barn, her heart giving out without warning. "I yelled at her to get inside during a hailstorm," he said, voice thick. "She was out checking on a newborn foal. By the time I got to her, it was too late." The regret in his eyes mirrored Emily's own. Lily, overhearing, joined them, sitting cross-legged on a hay bale. "Mom always said storms pass, but what we do in them defines us," she added quietly. The unexpected vulnerability created a bridge between them, three souls bound by loss in the eye of nature's fury. But then came the twist, the storm wasn't just wind and rain. A deafening crack split the air, and the barn door burst open, flung by a gust that carried debris like shrapnel. Outside, the twister was visible now, a dark funnel snaking toward the ranch, uprooting fences and scattering tools. Panique seethed, but Jack sprang into action. Lily, stay with the horses. Emily, help me secure the cattle pens, they'll bolt if that thing gets closer. Emily's trembling hands fumbled with the latches, her fear threatening to paralyze her. As they worked side by side, a calf broke free, terrified, darting toward the open fields where the tornado loomed. Without thinking, Emily chased after it, her city shoes slipping in the mud. Emily, no. Get back. Jack shouted, but she couldn't stop. The calf was small, vulnerable, much like she felt inside, a creature lost in the storm. She cut it just as the wind picked up, wrapping her arms around its quivering body, shielding it from flying branches. Jack reached her moments later, his strong arms helping her drag the calf back to safety. As they stumbled into the barn, the twister veered slightly, sparing the main structures but tearing through a distant pasture. Breathless, soaked, they collapsed inside, the door barred once more. Lily rushed over, hugging her father, then turning to Emily with wide eyes. That was brave. Stupid, but brave. In that moment, amid the subsiding roar, Emily experienced a profound realization: bravery wasn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Her trembling had been a signal, not of weakness, but of a heart still capable of feeling deeply. Jack, looking at her with newfound respect, clapped her on the shoulder. You didn't have to do that. But you did. For a dumb calf. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving a rainbow arching over the drenched fields, a promise of renewal. But the real transformation happened in the quiet aftermath. As they assessed the minor damage, Emily opened up further, sharing how her selflessness had been buried under years of self-preservation. Jack, in turn, admitted he'd been hiding behind his gruff exterior, pushing people away to avoid more pain. Lily, wise beyond her years, suggested they turn the ranch into something more, a place for folks like Emily, weary travelers seeking solace. Weeks turned into months, and Emily stayed. She helped rebuild the fences, not just the physical ones, but the emotional barriers they'd all erected. The ranch became a haven, hosting workshops on resilience and community, drawing visitors from across the USA, veterans, single parents, dreamers who'd lost their way. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Jack found Emily by the fence where it all began. You got inside just in time, he said, a rare smile creasing his face. Not the barn, the family. Emily smiled back, her trembling long gone, replaced by a steady warmth. In that act of chasing the calf, she'd chased away her own isolation, discovering that true strength lay in connection. The power of humanity wasn't in grand gestures, but in the quiet choices to care, to risk, to heal together. And so, the Broken Arrow Ranch stood as a testament: storms come, but kindness endures, turning strangers into saviors, and wounds into wings. In a world that often felt divided, here was proof that selflessness could bridge any gap, leaving hearts fuller and hopes brighter. Emily, once lost, now guided others home, whispering to each newcomer, get inside, before it's too late to find where you belong.